Why is the East Coast empty? Hey everyone, I'm here. So the East Coast of the United States is one of the most densely populated areas of the country. That is, except for one weird little spot where all of these states meet up here: Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. Yeah, I know it looks like a watermark, but it's not. It's just a lack of people. Why is this region of the Southeast so absurdly empty? Well, let's talk about it today. Okay, so to really understand why the US Southeast Coast is so empty, we've got to look at a population density map of the United States. Now this one is specifically for 2020, and it's broken down by county. I promise you that this will make sense in just a second. Just take a close look at the southeast region of the country, specifically Georgia, South Carolina, and North Carolina. The coastal counties along the Atlantic Ocean have very few people living in them relative to the rest of the states. To be fair, if you live in one of these coastal towns, then maybe you're thinking, hey, wait a minute, our town isn't empty. But when you zoom out, you realize how small your settlement actually is in comparison to the rest of the state. And also keep in mind, this map is not broken down by actual cities, but rather counties. If we were to get even closer, you would see some small urban areas with moderate population sizes. But overall, there is a clear lack of large settlements. To really illustrate this point, I want to look at two things. First, I want to show you where the major cities are within each of these three states. And second, I want to zoom in on one of the coastal cities and compare its size to a major city that's much larger. As you can see, the major cities of Atlanta, Augusta, Columbia, and Charlotte are all located hundreds of kilometers away from the Atlantic coast. These are all major urban centers with over 500,000 people in their respective metro areas. In fact, Atlanta has over 6 million people in its metro area. In comparison, the coastal cities of Charleston, Wilmington, and Savannah have under 900,000 people. The metro area of Charleston is actually the largest of the three, with just under 800,000 people. Wilmington has a metro population of just under 600,000 and Savannah has just over 500,000. Now these aren't bad-sized cities by any stretch of the imagination, but they are nowhere near the major urban centers in their respective states. And what's really strange about this is that the exact opposite is true of New England and New York. Almost every major city in these two states is on the coast. Boston, Providence, Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, New York City, all of these major urban centers are on the coast. You can actually fit all of the residents of Savannah, Georgia, and Charleston, South Carolina, and Wilmington, North Carolina, and still have room to spare inside the city limits of New York City. So why isn't there a massive metropolis on this empty stretch of coastline? Or why are there such huge metropolises on the northeast coastline? Well, the answer is geography. But before we get into the geographic factors that make this region so empty, now, if you're enjoying this video, I'd ask that you please consider liking and subscribing. This helps my channel tremendously, and it signals to the algorithm that you enjoy videos like this one. Also, if you're interested in maps and geography and nerdy stuff like that, consider checking out my new store. We've got t-shirts, hoodies, mugs, and more. I'll leave a link to it in the description below. Okay, so obviously I've already alluded to the fact that the reason that this area of the southeast coast is so empty is because of geography. But what exactly does that mean? What is it about the geography of this region that makes it so hard to support large populations? Well, the answer is pretty simple. The Atlantic coastline in the Carolinas and Georgia doesn't really have many good natural harbors. Now remember that this was way back before modern technology made it easy to transport goods across long distances, or before dredging and land reclamation became common practice. People tended to settle near natural harbors. There are some obvious reasons for this. For one, if you're an indigenous tribe, then a harbor means that you have access to seafood, which is a great source of protein. Also, most coastal settlements ended up being trading centers of some sort. Having a natural harbor meant that ships could easily come and go and unload their goods without having to worry about getting stuck on sandbars or having to tow their ship into shore. Of course, not every single settlement was a trading center, but almost all of them were fishing villages. Natural harbors are what originally made places like Boston, New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and many other port cities possible. And without natural harbors, no city could ever become a major urban center. In contrast, you can see how the coast of New England and the New York area are riddled with natural harbors. Every single major city on this part of the East Coast has a natural harbor except for one, and that's Providence. But Providence has the second largest port in New England behind Boston, and it's only a small upandover from the mouth of the Providence River. Its harbor is basically just a natural estuary that wasn't deep enough to accommodate larger vessels, but Providence still has a major port nonetheless. You can't really say the same about the southeast coastline. Sure, there are estuaries, but none of them are really deep enough to allow for the offloading of goods. And there's another major problem. This part of the coast has barrier islands, lots of them. Barrier islands are essentially sandbars that have built up enough sediment to form islands parallel to the mainland. They often have beaches on one side and marshland on the other, and they tend to migrate back and forth over time as storms hit the coast and wash away large portions of them. Places like the Outer Banks of North Carolina or Cape Cod, Massachusetts, are examples of barrier islands. Now, barrier islands are great if you want to build a beach house and never get tired of hearing about Jimmy Buffett, but they are terrible if you're trying to build a major shipping port. Not only is the water too shallow for large vessels, but it's nearly impossible to construct a stable dock or pier that aren't be washed away in a storm. In fact, if you look closely at this map of the United States, you can see the major difference between the two coasts. The coast of New England and New York is irregular. This means that there are lots of nooks and crannies, coves and bays, and inlets and harbors. And this makes it much easier to find places to dock your ship. The coast of the southeast is straight. There are a few small embayments, but nothing really substantial. You might think that Savannah would have a major port, considering its proximity to the mouth of the Savannah River, but there's a massive sandbar at the entrance of the river that prevents large ships from entering. This is the main reason why Savannah is a small city, despite being in one of the most densely populated countries on Earth. I should mention that this is a major reason why the early British colonies in the South were centered around places like Charleston, Savannah, and Wilmington, and they were also centered around the Piedmont region in places like Augusta and Columbia. The Piedmont region is essentially the rolling hills that surround the coastal plain and extend to the Appalachian Mountains. The climate here is slightly drier and cooler than further south, which made it more appealing to Europeans. And as I mentioned earlier, there were also better places to establish trading posts. But regardless, these cities never grew into major population centers because of a lack of navigable waterways. Yes, the rivers were wide enough to facilitate trade, but they weren't deep enough. This is ultimately why the US southeast coast is so empty. There simply aren't any large cities along the coast. All of the major urban centers are hundreds of kilometers inland, where the climate is more accommodating and where better ports can be established. Geography, man, it's always coming back to that. Okay, well, that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching. See ya.